evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a privilege to welcome you all in today's panel discussion on a topic of immense significance, the Trump 2.0 opportunities for India, brought to you by the Indian Futures in the partnership of the India Habitat Center. We are privileged to have with us an expert panel with distinguished career. We have first Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. Ambassador Sibal is the Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University and a career diplomat who retired as a Foreign Secretary of India. Over his career, he has represented India as an ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France, and Russia. Professor Pant, Vice President of Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi, and a Professor of International Relations at King's College, London. His analysis on global strategic affairs have made him one of the leading voices in the field. Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. Ambassador Mukherjee is the President of India Habitat Center. She has held including multiple distinguished roles as a diplomat, including serving as an Indian ambassador to the Netherlands, widely regarded as a foremost expert on European affairs. She also served as India's permanent representative at UNESCO. Dr. Manish Dabhade. Dr. Dabhade is the founder of Indian Futures. He is an associate professor of diplomacy at Seaport Center at School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Ladies and gentlemen, I now invite our esteemed panelists to kindly take their seat on the dais. Before we begin, let me take a moment to introduce the Indian Futures. We are an independent think tank since 2017 on the idea of New India in all its multi-layer manifestation. We are a mission mode to have a deep dive conversation looking beyond the nation and international headlines by the day on a range of themes: politics and economics, technology and enterprise, society and culture. Since our obsession, we have hosted both in-person and virtual intellectual stakeholders exchanges with some of the really top minds from India and various global capitals such as Washington, D.C., Tokyo, London, Riyadh, Melbourne, from the worlds of government, academia, diplomacy, business, and media. Without further ado, I would like to call Manish Dabhade to take the proceeding forward with his introductory remarks. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikhil, and I'm extremely delighted to welcome you all today. And the most important part, this is really JNU dominance, because we have the Chancellor leading today's discussion, and Harsh and me are also JNU alumni. So this is, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee is going to be a fantastic chair, and I'm sure is going to have a great time managing JNU. Yes, and she's a Miranda House alumni. So I think it's a very timely conversation we are having today, and I'm sure every think tank you can think of would be doing this conversation, and for obvious reasons. So it has been, if you just looked at the inaugural address, and I'm sure most of you would have seen Trump's inaugural address, it has been a terrific start to India-US relations under Trump 2.0. So we have had Dr. S. Jaishankar at the inaugural. Immediately after swearing in, we had the Quad Foreign Ministers meet. Dr. S. Jaishankar met the US Congress top leadership, and had bilateral conversations with the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. If you would have looked at, seen the press conference at the embassy, Dr. S. Jaishankar, we could immediately sense that there was sort of exuberance, there was a sort of excitement, and one of the significant points which he made about his initial interactions with the Trump senior cabinet members was what more can be done on the India-US front. I think there was a palpable sense of warmth, there was a palpable sense of excitement about the future of India-US relations. Keeping it as as one can see, let us also not forget the basics that it is Donald Trump presidency, the unpredictable, the maverick, and in fact, The Economist has come out with a special issue calling it the imperial presidency. And he is described as the tariff man, as the deal man. So where does that leave India? Should we be looking only at or what lessons can we really learn from our dealings when Trump was the president from 2017 till 2021? The most important consequential part of the next 4 years are going to be how America deals with itself and how America deals with China. So are we looking at really Cold War 2.0? And at one level, Trump is talking about tariffs, but at the other level, it is also about the grand bargain, the grand deal with the Chinese. So where does that leave India? The only thing, what we can say about Trump right now is that he has returned to office much more confident, much more prepared, and I think all of us need to tighten our seatbelts, and it is really going to be an interesting time for students and scholars and analysts and decision makers of international relations. So let me stop here and invite Ambassador Mukherjee. So let me thank Ambassador Mukherjee once again for partnering with the Indian Futures to have at least once in a month a lecture series, and in fact this is the second in this month. She has been extremely generous, and I'm sure all of you would have noticed the transformation that has gone under her leadership, and we were just talking about it, how the India Habitat Center is really now at the center of all very significant conversations in a range of fields, not just about culture. So great, ma'am, and congratulations to you again. So over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dabhade, and I'm extremely honored to have Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, who is very special to me because he was our Foreign Secretary, he was my boss. I remember once going to him as Joint Secretary and saying, "Can you improve my draft?" And he looked at it and he said, "It's perfect." So I thought, "You've made my day." He's a very, very dynamic figure in MEA, and now, of course, JNU is very lucky to have him as Chancellor. Dr. Pant and I are old buddies. We go back a long time. It's great to have him here. And as you can see, I don't have a speech. I have a piece of paper with one line on it, and there's a reason for it. This topic which we are discussing today should actually be put in its proper perspective, which is how come Trump won the popular vote and the Electoral College with such a massive majority, so that the lady whom he called Dear Kamala did not win. Then there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that United States began as a country of immigrants. And when you touch down at JFK, as I did in 1986, I spent 3 years working for the Permanent Mission of India to the UN. That was my first visit to the US. I saw the beautiful Statue of Liberty. Now, I'm actually very Francophone at heart. Not Anglophone at all. Having spent the formative years of my foreign service in French-speaking countries. And I thought to myself, wow, where have they stolen this one from? And then I realized that it had been gifted to the American people after the French Revolution of 1789. But unlike in France, at the base of the Statue of Liberty is written, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore." What could be more left liberal than that? The American dream of immigrants, after having killed off all the original inhabitants, that's an ugly story we won't get into. They did the same in Canada and Australia. The American dream was built on encouraging immigrants and immigration. And that is why this was put at the base of the statue. way back in 1863, they did a poetry competition and got this one as the best and most appropriate. What happened between then and 2025? How come then Donald Trump won, pledging to send immigrants back? That shows several tendencies which are very interesting for India. First of all, United States, the people of United States, the white people particularly, but also the Hispanics and the blacks, don't want to share the American dream with others, notably from India and China. Because the society is also changing and its color is changing from white to yellow and brown. Those who keep America going and those who contribute to making America great again, many of them have come from our shores. And when one is asked about whether he will abolish the H-1B visa, he can't do that, because if he does that, then the president's best buddy will become the president's worst enemy. That's Elon Musk. His business and those of the other trillionaires who attended the inaugural, they all depend on highly skilled Indians to run their business for them. Moreover, a lot has been said about Trump bringing tariffs, Trump doing this, Trump doing that. But in my perspective, and I've studied it quite closely, Trump is a transactional deal maker. When you make a deal, whether in diplomacy or in business, you first raise your stakes very high. But you know that you have a minimum negotiating position. So over a period of negotiation, you come down to the minimal negotiating position, and that's the deal. Whether it's in diplomacy or in trade, that is the way deal making is done. And Trump is a classical deal maker. So I know my colleagues will speak at length about what it means for India. But in my perspective, what it means for India is the kind of activities of the American deep state at the fag end of the Biden presidency, since Biden was not able to control the American deep state, like, for instance, the regime change in Bangladesh, which happened. As I said on television yesterday, if United States is India's best friend and closest strategic partner, is it a nice and friendly gesture to do regime change in Bangladesh, thereby endangering for the first time in many years the entire eastern border, when we already have problems on the Sino-Indian border and the western border where a ceasefire is still holding, thankfully. The establishment of a Rakhine state, not taking it seriously, endangering our entire northeast, the Siliguri corridor, apart from Assam and West Bengal. Hopefully, under Trump, that will not happen. A lot of people have packed their bags and left. I am eagerly waiting for Mohammed Yunus to leave. He has an American passport, which is interesting, since Bangladesh does not allow dual passports like India. I often ask myself the question that he talks a lot about Sheikh Hasina's passport. Maybe somebody should ask him, what kind of passport do you have? Do you have a Bangladeshi passport at all? Or are you in Bangladesh as the representative of the American deep state with an American passport? That's a question some of you could ask him on Twitter next time. I will stop here and request my colleague, my mentor, my boss, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, Chancellor of JNU. Would you like to speak from there? I think it'll be more comfortable. Fine, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Bhaswati. Thank you, Mr. Dabhade, to invite me to participate in this evening's function. The subject is very topical. It's on everybody's mind. And if you looked at the coverage of the US presidential election in our press, you would think that it is an Indian election. I've never seen so much coverage given to a foreign election. I mean, there are other elections that take place, whether it's the UK or France or Germany, or maybe there's an article here, here and there. But in this case, it is constant coverage in great detail on every aspect of it, and repeated analysis about what it means or what it may not mean, what his agenda is, a plethora of articles in all our papers, at the end of the day, much of it is repetitive. In a sense, it shows how much our elite, if you like, is so much fixated on our relationship with the United States. There is no doubt that it is the most important relationship we have today. If you look at any aspect of the relationship, it's our biggest trade partner. Trade has, in goods and services, has gone up to $200 billion. In terms of technology transfers, it is the biggest and the most important source of advanced technologies. And some of the initiatives taken by the Biden administration, the initiative for critical and emerging technologies, is very significant, although progress is going to be slow, inevitably, because it is across the board partnership. It's not at all limited to the government or government departments. The universities are involved, private sector is involved, the young innovators are involved, research institutions are involved. So bringing them all together on a common platform and develop a cooperative program takes time, but the direction is clear. Again, in terms of foreign investment, they are the biggest investors in our country. And being the strongest economic and military power in the world, whatever it does, positively or negatively, impacts on us as well as the rest of the world. If you look at the range of dialogues that we have with the United States, it's totally unmatched with any other country. And look at the size of their embassy here. It's huge, which again goes to show that the levels of interaction with India are very wide-ranging and deep. So we can't ignore this relationship at all. Nevertheless, as I said, the amount of coverage that we have given to this election of the president shows that we consider this relationship vital for our future ties, which is both something which one can say is legitimate, but one has to be careful that we just don't work ourselves into a psychological situation that we go overboard. And I think certainly our press and our commentators have gone overboard with regard to this election and its implications for India. The subject of today's talk is Trump 2.0 opportunities for India. The way I look at it is that there are no special opportunities. It's a continuum with the Biden administration, despite a lot of issues on which we differed, and I can speak about that. A lot of progress was made in our ties in every domain. If the trade grew, if defense ties grew, if investments in India also grew in any aspect, it happened during the Biden administration in a large measure. There was very significant advances in the relationship. Now, if with Trump, what could be our expectations? It would be that we are able to build upon this foundation with the Trump administration. But the Trump's policies, his thinking, his approach, his persona is so unpredictable. It's so unpredictable that one doesn't know which way he will go. In some senses, we can be fairly confident that some of the security, defense-related issues on which we have made progress with the United States, those will be consolidated. Trump is committed to the Indo-Pacific. It is during his time that the Indo-Pacific was raised to the political level, at the foreign minister's level. And the fact that when Jaishankar won there, which is remarkable, it's a remarkable success of our diplomacy in some senses, that when he went there for the inauguration, immediately thereafter you had the Quad meeting. And the first meeting that the new Secretary of State had with any foreign dignitary was with the Indian External Affairs Minister. So apart from the Quad meeting, there were individual meetings with the ministers, and they issued a joint statement which reiterates the importance of the Indo-Pacific in the context of various things, including deterring China. So on the Indo-Pacific, I think there should be stability in respective commitments. On the other hand, if the Indo-Pacific, in many respects, we have tried to make sure that the Indo-Pacific doesn't focus too much on China and too much on the security thing. We don't call it the quadrilateral security initiative, we call it the Quad because we don't want to use the word security and give it prominence, too much prominence. But with China, it's very contradictory. One really doesn't know which way it'll go. He has surrounded himself with the China hawks, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, and others. They are all China hawks. At the same time, the only person publicly whom he invited to his inauguration was Xi Jinping, which shows a certain state of mind. And then he rang him just before his inauguration. And Xi Jinping sent his vice president, knowing that Trump could spring a surprise. Because earlier he had said that the first order I'll issue is imposing God knows how many tariffs, 60% or 100% or 20%, whatever the figures he keeps mentioning, on China, which would have been a huge snub to the Chinese vice president if after having attended the inauguration on the morrow, Trump announced these tariffs on China. I think there was some deal on TikTok also, so that he delayed that in order to keep these things a little less confrontational. He has said in the past, not very much in the past, very recently, that, well, that's his style. Praising Xi Jinping, is an amazing person, and I know him very well. And China and United States can together solve all the world's problems. Now, I don't think he intended to give a signal that he's comfortable with the idea of a G2, but it can be interpreted that way, that in his mind, if there are good understandings between US and China, then they can bring about stability. Now, how would that play? In our region, I remember Obama and the Chinese president at that time, in their joint statement, when Obama went there, gave the responsibility for peace and security in South Asia to China and US working together, against which we protested. But let's see how it goes. There is this issue of H-1B visas, which accounts for a lot of attention that is being paid to this issue because it affects the sort of people who are gathered in, but maybe not gathered in this room, but it is the elite of this country, and they're very concerned about the implications of the H-1B visas tightening up, especially with this new executive order about not giving U.S. Citizenship to those born on U.S. soil, and this is causing a lot of concern. But I won't go into this because one can discuss the pros and cons of H-1B visas, but this is one of the things that... yeah, insofar as the illegal migrants are concerned, I was going to talk about migration. We are the fourth largest number of illegal migrants in the United States, and they have already identified 19,000 and some, although our External Affairs Minister says that this may not be the correct figure. And
voice is not coming clear. If you both the mics will be used.
so whether is 19,000 or less, I think we have taken a very sensible position and right position that if we can verify that they are Indian citizens, we take them back. Why should we say we won't take back illegal migrants into the United States of America? Though at the political level, it may not be very good for the government to see plane loads of coming here with Indians and who will shout here and create problems and say, look, you talk about your very close relationship with the United States, and here you've not been able to save us and protect us and that kind of a thing. But I think we are taking the right position on this. Then there is the issue of tariffs. He has that bug in his head that India is the tariff king, which actually, if you look at the trade deficit the United States has with other countries, we are 9th in the list. The total deficit of the United States, of that, 30% is accounted for by China, 16% by the European Union, 15% by Canada, about 9-10% by Mexico. India is only 3.2%. But if you look at the kind of statements he makes, he thinks that if somehow he can reduce the deficit with India, then the United States will have a positive trade balance. This is ridiculous. He doesn't do his homework, he's not properly advised, he's got something in his mind, and he keeps repeating it. But he's now given instructions to his USTR to explore the possibility of bilateral trade arrangements or trade agreements with countries with which the United States has a deficit, which opens up an avenue for us to deal with him, because that's what we have in mind, that if you want us to reduce tariffs, then it should be on the basis of negotiations, where if we give concessions, you give concessions. And this was tried during his first term without success, but this time I think we also feel that our backs are against the wall a little bit, and but we will negotiate hard and hopefully get a trade deal. Trump and America, including the Biden administration, they're very worried about resilient supply chains, trustworthy supply chains. There are areas which China absolutely dominates. So here again, there is scope for us to be able to reach some kind of agreements with the United States, which would allow us to have American companies co-produce, manufacture in India. But on the other hand, this MAGA business, and that, I mean, at Davos he said yesterday or day before, telling the European companies, you better come and invest in America, I'll give you the lowest taxes possible. And if you don't, you'll face tariff walls. So whether he will actually cooperate on the ground and encourage the American industry to look for opportunities in India to co-manufacture. And there were some very important agreements that took place under the Biden administration, especially with semiconductors, including for their space program and everything else. These are very sensitive areas. My feeling is somehow that he will not interrupt this. He will not interrupt this because this is advantageous to the United States. And it's not as if India is China, where we will draw in thousands of American companies to work in India, etc. There is finally the issue of the personal rapport between Trump and our Prime Minister, which is real, which has its importance, because Trump is the kind of person who has a quirk in his personality. He likes certain kind of people, and he likes Modi, just as he likes Millet, he likes Orban. Okay. Well, I had about half an hour more to say. I will maybe in the questions and answers, because I haven't touched the foreign policy part of it at all. I've only concentrated only on our bilateral issues with. Now, and finally, I'll then stop here because we can deal with the foreign policy issues later, which is very important, is that the Democrats had certain bugbears of their own, the human rights and persecution of minorities and religious freedoms and things like that. And they were castigating us periodically in their reports, despite the fact that the relationship in other respects had moved extremely well. But on this, they were creating constant problems for managing our ties because they were attacking us on these issues. And the Indian opposition derived full benefit from it to the extent that there were suspicions that some elements in the United States and the Indian opposition elements are working together in this regard. And I think legitimately so, these suspicions were there. Now with Trump, I don't think he's going to bother very much about it. On the other hand, the State Department is mandated by the Congress to produce these reports. And therefore, they can't just wind them up. And the reports will keep coming. And the last thing I want to say is that the Democrats, Trump got only 1.5% of the vote, more than the Democrats. So the Democrats are there. Their entire ecosystem is there. So they're going to keep attacking us. The New York Times, Washington Post, all these foreign affairs magazine, the think tanks, so they'll keep attacking us. And in fact, the closer we get to Trump, the more reason they'll have to see where they can pinprick us or attack us and this and that. So we'll have to live with this. And on the religious freedom things, I think we have to be a bit careful because there's a lot of support of evangelists for Trump. And in fact, in his speech, he talked about the Christian faith and this and that. So we'll have to see how that goes. But overall, I think I won't call opportunities for India. That seems to suggest that there will be dramatic new openings for us with Trump's America. I don't think this is the case. But there will be, to my mind, hopefully so, a steady progress in our ties because there are issues on which we have shared interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sibal. And I think one of the most important takeaways that I noted was that you said that there are no special opportunities for India in the Trump presidency. I hope you'll come back to it in the question and answer session. And some of the other points you made. One of the interesting aspects of that you said about religious freedom and etc. was it was very striking that President Trump took oath with his hand on a Bible with a bishop in front of him. I wonder if we did the same in India, what would the American Washington Post have said? Oh my God, Bhagavad Gita, Panditji, Nariyal, incense. Oh my God, is this secularism? On the other hand, the whole world saw President Trump with his hand on his Bible, and then he went, poor man, to the church where he got ticked off royally by the lady at the pulpit who said, Mr. President, have mercy on these people. And later on he came out and he said, that was nasty. That was really, really nasty. So I don't know how much, whether the evangelists support him or not. I don't think he's going to have such a smooth relationship with the church because he has made certain announcements which go against what the church has been saying. So again, that's another interesting thing to look out for. But in the meantime, and without further ado, I'd like to ask my dear friend, Dr. Harsh Pant. We're very privileged to have him here to speak to us for about 15 minutes, and then we will take question and answers from the audience. Right, Manish? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mukherjee, for having me, and it's lovely to be back at IHC and to be talking to a relatively young audience. Most of you are youngsters. It's wonderful to be to see interest. But one thing I should say that Mr. Trump generally evokes a lot of interest. So anywhere you put Mr. Trump, you get a lot of eyeballs. And I think one thing that can be safely said is that no one really knows how this is going to pan out. So we are all, in the dark, trying to ascertain what may happen. But this gives a lot of opportunity. It may not come to India. It gives a lot of opportunity to us, people like us who talk on TV, on news, op-eds, and who are think tankers and academics, to spend another 4 years having a rollicking ride, enjoying every moment, enjoying every tweet, commenting on it, thinking about it, over-intellectualizing it. So it's a great, I think, opportunity in that sense. No pun intended about the topic, but that's how I look at it, that this is going to be a hugely interesting next 4 years, where we are going to observe, of course, Mr. Trump doing a lot of things, but also in a way, the world that has been changing so rapidly over the last few years. Perhaps this process gets accelerated. What is also, I think, interesting is that if you have these conversations, every time, if you recall, if you go back to January of the year when a new administration comes in, there is a lot of pessimism in India. Often I've seen, every time there is a new administration that comes in, we look at that administration and say, oh my God, it's doom and gloom. You go back to Obama, G2, then you go back to Mr. Trump's first term, oh my God, he's going to bring those tariffs on us, and what he's going to do, we don't know. And then you have Biden, oh, he's going to come back with all the human rights baggage, and he's going to destroy this relationship that has been doing so well. And I think now we are back to Mr. Trump. I think something that Ambassador Sibal pointed out, that we have had a very interesting trajectory of the relationship that has been going up despite the changing administrations, both in India and in the US. And I think that's something that one has to acknowledge, that in the wider sweep of history, if you look at 1990 as your decisive moment, both for India and for global politics, since then, more than the personalities, the structural factors have shaped India-US relationship. And those structural factors are not going anywhere, whether Mr. Trump is there or not, whether Mr. Biden is there, or he was there for the last 4 years, what kind of combination there is in the Congress. I think we have seen a strong bipartisan support for India-US relationship. Across domains, across issues, there are, of course, as was pointed out, there are enormous issues where there are differences, where India has taken a stance against what perhaps the administrations in Washington have wanted. But I do think that what has happened is the global order has given India that opportunity to stand up, to make a case for itself, to find a new voice for itself. And that has allowed this back and forth between India and the US to become more interesting, because something that used to go one way is now actually going both ways. India can also make its case on a number of issues very strongly, that look, you cannot push us back. And we saw that. We have seen that in the case of Iran. We have seen that in the case of Russia. We have seen that in the case of China in a number of ways. And I think that conversation, which the space that India has got in the emerging global order, that I think is a very interesting facet to assess India-US relationship and how this relationship has been evolving. So I think in some ways, we have to challenge that the pessimism around the relationship, which often seeps into our conversation about India-US relationship, because it is America has not been driving in some ways the relationship. And I think Ambassador Sibal was rightly pointed out that if you look at the global order, you look at America that has been on a relative decline. And if you look at the salience, the agency of other actors, that has grown. And India's salience agency has particularly grown. And I think that combination of factors has made this relationship much more equitable. Not perfect, but I think in some ways India's resurgence has allowed this relationship to become much more interesting than it would otherwise be. Because otherwise you would often see a big power pushing India, in one direction, and India, perhaps apart from saying, using diplomatic words, verbiage, not being able to do much. But you see now India doing a lot. And I think that's the core strength in some ways of India. The fact that India does not rely on American support for managing China is a big deal. Here you have America's partners and allies who are dependent on the US. And you hear Trump's berating, Trump is complaining about them. Look, you have to spend more. You have to do, you are not doing enough. Take care of your security. But India is not an alliance partner. And despite India not being an alliance partner, if you look at India's role in the changing security matrix of Indo-Pacific, it's quite striking. And for anyone sitting in Washington, D.C., who wants to retreat from the world, who wants to say that, look, I'm going to focus inwards, as Mr. Trump is saying, that I want to focus on Western Hemisphere, maybe Panama Canal or maybe Greenland, but not beyond that. I'm not interested in wars. I want to be a peacemaker. India allows him that leeway to say that, look, there are partners here which are doing their job very well. Of course, there are partners who are not doing their jobs very well. But India is one country which has not relied on American support, which has not relied on American alliance frameworks to do its own job. India has stood up to China. India has stood up on a number of issues in terms of the security architecture of the region, and has created that space and created a voice for itself, which I think gives India a lot of opportunities that may come as Trump decides to rejig American security architecture. And I think that would be interesting to observe. Two things are very interesting. One is Trump has fundamentally altered the balance of power within the US, politically. I mean, Ambassador Sibal is right that, he has just got 1.5% more votes than Ms. Harris. But I think if you look at the conversations, if you look at where the Democrats are now pitching in their politics, it has moved to the right. So the focus from this very woke liberal ideas of how America should be run on socio-religious matters, on foreign policy matters, on matters of economy, you have seen that shift to the right, where Mr. Trump is now looking at the world through a different, pushing American politics to look at the world through a different lens, looking at themselves through a different lens. And I think that has been a very interesting shift in the American balance. And we have seen that shift from the first term of Mr. Trump. So if you look at Trump 1.0, the way the debates have been transformed, in terms of domestic politics, in terms of domestic social-religious issues, in terms of the coalitions that he has been trying to build domestically, and in terms of these debates on, for example, economic globalization. How does America relate to a world of economic globalization? And he's saying, no, I don't want to relate to this world. I want to find my own paradigm. I want to relate to this world in a different manner. And there he has pushed. If you see Mr. Biden's last 4 years, he has basically followed Mr. Trump. The first thing Biden administration said, that the fundamental relationship of my policy establishment with America would be through the lens of the middle classes. Now, Democrats have never said that before, but Biden realized that that's how Trump won the first time. And so the debate shifted on economics. The whole debate on domestic manufacturing, the whole debate on I'm not interested in free trade, I'm not interested in doing trading, big trading blocks, I want protectionism for myself. The economic nationalism that emerged, that Trump created, the discourse that Trump created, Biden carried it forward. So we are looking at the shift in the balance of power within America in politics. And I think that is a very interesting change on fundamentals of domestic politics. Similarly, I think there is and of course, the second element of that debate was on China. I think if Mr. Trump had not come to power, in his first avatar, we would not have seen the dramatic shift on the China debate in the West that happened post Mr. Trump coming to power. He pushed a lot of buttons, he pressed a lot of buttons that started that discourse to move in a particular direction on China, and that led to a broader consensus on China in the West, that China is a problem. Now, of course, Mr. Sibal is right that we don't know whether in terms of finding a grand bargain with China he might go back, but I don't think essentially the trajectory of Sino-American relationship is going to move very far away from the structural realities of that relationship, because that's structurally not possible for an emerging and a power and an established power to come to that sort of a consensus. It might be tactical consensus on certain issues. On Taiwan, there might be, on South China Sea, it might also be on South Asia. But I think broader grand bargain of a global kind, I don't think is likely to happen, which also would mean that you would see this tension manifesting itself in different ways. And I do think that is something that, if you look at the transformative effect of Trump's politics, of Trump's policies, he may not realize it. He himself may not realize it that I have done this, but I think if you are looking at the arc of some of these debates, you're looking at a very different trajectory of these conversations than we used to happen 8 years back. And I do think that that makes this moment particularly salient because Trump has come to power, at least what he believes, that he has the mandate, he is in a hurry, he has both House of Representatives and the Senate under control, at least till next year, November next year, when you will have again congressional elections and the balance of power can shift. And with that mandate, can he move even further? And a number of issues, I think he's testing that. A lot of the issues were mentioned, from Panama to Greenland to Canada to tariffs to China to technology. And I think almost all of these issues, if you see, he has fired the first salvo. Ambassador Mukherjee was absolutely right. It's like a roller coaster of a negotiating strategy, that you fire the first salvo, you make it maximalist, and then you wait and watch and see where the chips fall. You wait and watch and see where your adversary, where your interlocutor is going to, how that interlocutor is going to react. And that, I think, is going to be fascinating, because that opens up opportunities for countries like India. Because we are not living in a world where things have been set. We are living in a world where things are making their move, and I think India will, of course, have to figure out its own responses. It's going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be very interesting to watch. But for policymakers, it's going to come with its own sets of challenges. And I do think that the opportunities, in some ways, lie in making use of that transactional element in Mr. Trump. I think we do realize as students of international politics that all international politics is transactional. Mr. Biden may not have said it, Mr. Obama may not have said it, but they were also transactional with India and with other countries. But here is someone who openly says he's transactional, that he wants to make a deal, and that he's starting from this position, and therefore how do you adjust to that position is up to you. And I think that's where the opportunity lies in terms of calibrating and recalibrating your responses and trying to come to certain consensus with the other side. And I think one of the issues that we are going to see, which is going to be very interesting, will be that on what issues can India give in to ensure that it has space to maneuver on those issues where it doesn't want to give in. And essentially, that's the art of diplomacy, that you look at a range of issues and you see that where is it possible. I think Ambassador Sibal mentioned one of them, that look, illegal immigration is bad. So we are going to say it is bad, and we are going to do something about it openly, transparently. Perhaps that would give us space in negotiating all those difficult areas where we may not be in a position to give in much. So therefore, in a sense, looking at that transactional matrix as a whole, I think that's going to be the challenge and the opportunity for India. Whether India capitalizes on it depends on its own internal resolve, its own internal consensus, and also its own desire to build capacity at home, which is something that I think the focus has been for a while, that on a number of issues, whether it is trade, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is defense, we are going to see domestic capacity building, domestic capability building. And how do you relate to that? Make America Great Again, is very similar sounding to Atmanirbhar Bharat, that if they want to build capacity at home, we also want to build capacity at home. Now, how do you transact with these kind of sentiments is going to be a challenge. But again, are there areas where India can do business, and are there areas where India will push back and can push back as it has done in the past? I think that is something that gives us, both as analysts and those who are sitting and doing policy, a lot to think about and lot to do over the next 4 years. But I hope that in whatever Mr. Trump does or does not do, we do not lose the momentum that we have built on India-US relationship, because that relationship is important for a number of reasons, as was highlighted. And that relationship, in some ways, is also one of the main impetus behind a lot of other things that we are able to do in the world. So as we build our own capacity, as India builds its own voice, certain kinds of partnerships are going to be very, very critical, and India-US partnership is one of those partnerships. Certainly one can look at it and say that, look, there are enormous challenges, problems here. that we have to negotiate with. But I think that is beyond Trump. That is, in a sense, that has always been the case. With any administration, we have had challenges. We have had different sorts of challenges with Biden. We will have different sorts of challenges with Mr. Trump. But that trajectory, that arc of India-US relationship that has continued to be on an upward trajectory, I think that hopefully will continue, because the structural factors that are driving this partnership will perhaps also keep us focused along that trajectory, and will continue to deliver results for India-US relationship as they have done in the past. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pant. In fact, a very important takeaway is the point you made that Trump has fundamentally altered the balance of power domestically. And when the balance of power of a superpower is changed domestically, it will have an impact on the relationship of that power with the world, be it transactional or very transactional. Because I agree with you that foreign policy is transactional. It's exactly the way diplomacy is conducted. It's transactional. And while most people would say foreign policy is based on a country's core national interests, then when you negotiate transactionally to protect your country's core national interests. So only in his case, the problem is he raises the level of rhetoric very high in order to shock his interlocutor, and then comes down. So it will be interesting to see, particularly with regard to China, how he's going to handle it. We have about 20 minutes for questions. Ambassador Sibal did not have time to complete what he wanted to say on foreign policy, so do somebody ask him on foreign policy so he can complete what he wanted to say. And otherwise, the floor is open, and I'm going to first look for one of Professor Dabhade's lady students. He said today lots and lots of women students have come. I can't see a single lady raising her hand. So by default, good. Please give the mic to this young lady.
Yes.
I do hope you're Professor Dabhade's student, but if you're from Miranda House, that's even better. You have the floor.
My name is Upasna, and I'm a scholar pursuing PhD in South Asian Studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University. And my question is to Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. The question is, how can India take advantage of energy independence, Trump's executive order regarding energy independence and trade in dollar, particularly in its energy sector of India?
So I'm Vijayalakshmi from JNU. I'm pursuing PhD in Seaport. So it's not just a question, just to add something. It was very great to hear all of you. So as a very famous dictum, the foreign policy is more about continuity rather than change. So what's the Trump policy, the Trump 2.1, the kind of policy he's carried, so they has been carried by other administration, Biden. So my question is something like to Ambassador Sibal. So is it going, what happened, the kind of the blunder in our eastern border in Bangladesh, the kind of regime change under the Biden administration, so can we expect the same kind of things going to repeat further? Thank you.
We have time for 2 more questions. Just take a, please give her a mic.
This morning, one heard the news that General of Taiwan has received millions of dollars or yuan from China. How would he react to that? A defense, very high general in the yuan in
We'll
Taiwan.
take 1 more question.
Thank you for considering my question. My name is Shresh Sharma, Research Intern at Center of Geoeconomics for the Global South. A pleasure listening to all of you. My question is directed to Ambassador Sibal. Could you please list out some sectors or certain points where we could not really cooperate very nicely with the previous Biden administration, and where we can see some hope from the Trump administration? A little follow-up question: could we please, listen to you on ISET as well, because critical and emerging technologies is a specific sector which is, going to be in prevalence for a very long time. So, is the U.S.-India cooperation visible in the near future?
I'm going to ask both our panelists to speak. I'll give the floor first to Ambassador Sibal.
fact, I was going to say something about this energy independence that Trump has been talking about. It has, the worrying aspect is that this has direct implications for, let's say, the climate change agenda. This whole project of drilling more and more oil and natural gas with a view of making United States independent in this regard and sell its oil and gas all over the world. Then what happens to the UNFCCC agenda? For India and others who have moved very strongly towards renewable energy and everything else, and has been very active in the COP 28 or whatever, and the earlier COPs to press the developed countries to aid the developing world in developing more renewable energy in their countries in order to keep the global temperatures at 1.5 or whatever. Now, when Trump says, I'm going to drill more and rely on oil and gas, this takes the attention away from renewable energy. He has banned these, what are these called? No, electrical vehicles also. Windmills. He banned windmills. He has also, he's passed an executive order on the electrical vehicles, EVs. And also, he said that the countryside is being defaced with these solar panels. He doesn't want them either. So, which means that the transfer of technology and finances from the developed world to the developing countries would be now something which I don't think will happen because unless the United States is on board, the Europeans and others will not want to bear the entire burden of this. So this is not a good thing at all. The second aspect is strategic. Why does he want that? As it is, United States is the largest oil producer in the world, and they are exporting a lot of LNG, including to India. They're selling oil to India too, and they were responsible for the blow up of the Nord Stream too. In fact, Trump, when he had in his first term, when he had gone to Poland, he had spoken against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to say that we can sell you LNG and we'll make the terminals for you. And now he's asked the OPEC to reduce the price of oil. There is a Russian angle to this, and this includes Greenland. Why does he want to take over Greenland? No, he said, I'll buy it, and if it doesn't work, I'll use force. Why does he want to do this? Because then he becomes a real player in the Arctic trade routes, which currently are dominated by Russia. And if the oil prices are brought down, the way he's talking, then it'll be a double whammy on Russia. As it is, they're under sanctions and finding it very difficult to sell oil. And if the price goes down, then they have a financial problem for themselves. And India will have a problem too of buying oil from Russia because the carriers are under sanctions, the so-called shadow fleet. So on the one hand, he talks about non-interventionism and peace and everything else. But if you look at what he's actually doing, this Make America Great Again, it is to become an absolutely preeminent power. So it's not a peace agenda. It is an agenda of domination. And his view of international politics seems to be 19th century type, where I can claim territory. In fact, in his inaugural speech, nobody in the press has picked it up. He talked about the territorial expansion of the United States, but nobody has picked it up. What is the implication of that? Therefore, on this energy independence, I have a lot of questions about what his real intentions are. Now, in terms of continuity change, Bangladesh and all, he, as you know, I think partly because he may have felt it that way, but also because he wanted to capture the Hindu votes. So just before his election, he talked about the persecution of the minorities, including Hindu minorities in Bangladesh. But it is deeper than that. He knows the relationship between Yunus and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. In fact, Yunus funded Hillary Clinton's campaign against Trump during the last election. So he's not forgotten that. On Bangladesh, I think we can play our cards with the United States and see if we can generate the requisite pressure. But Yunus doesn't seem to be at all in a defensive mode. He just invited the ISI to come there. Why is he inviting the ISI? He's raising concerns in India about their combined intelligence activities in order to destabilize the Northeast once again. At least the attempt will be there. On Taiwan, I think this is just anecdotal. I don't think this is the core of the issue. He's also announced that he will, I've forgotten the figure, maybe Dr. Pant knows the figure of how much additional military aid he's going to give to Taiwan. And if you heard the confirmation hearings of Mark Rubio, he was asked questions on Taiwan, and one of the senators asked him about the porcupine strategy that the United States has, which means you will give so much weaponry to Taiwan that in case China wishes to invade Taiwan, then it will be hurt very badly, like a porcupine. So Mark Rubio said, well, I don't want to use this analogy, but the whole idea is to potentially impose such high cost on China that they'll think twice before invading Taiwan. Now let's see how this proceeds. But on ICET, I already answered that question, that I am very hopeful, and I think it will happen. The cooperation between us in this sector will continue.
Dr. Pant?
No, I have nothing to add. I just think that there is a broader theme, when you talk of energy and moving away from climate agenda. He has done a lot of other things to other multilateral institutions as well. So I think there is this idea that his disdain for multilateralism is quite clear. Now, that again, how do you think of global governance at a time in the age of Mr. Trump? Is there going to be any global governance, or are we going to live, as Ambassador Sibal said, in the time of the 19th century concerts of nations trying to, manage the world? I think that's what seems to me an extension of Trump 1.0. If you think of what he did, he had done the same thing. He had withdrawn from WHO then. He had withdrawn from a number of UN institutions in his first term. And I think he's now repeating that idea that, look, this doesn't work for me, this doesn't work. Anything that constrains US in any way is something that doesn't work, and we have to rethink. And not that being in an institution has prevented America from doing things that they wanted to do. But I think this in some ways also shakes up the cards of what kind of an institutional architecture there is. So again, I think and the role that minilaterals or plurilaterals or these emerging frameworks can play. This is also going to be an interesting one. How invested he would be, for example, in Quad or in other areas, or whether he would see this as as in juxtaposition to, say, BRICS or SCO, and what kind of a role he would see there then for India. So I do think there are a whole host of questions we can raise at this point. But what is true is that he doesn't like institutions. He doesn't think they are of great value to the US. And the more free America is of these institutional frameworks, the better it is for the US. And I think that's what he's going to. He went to the UN and said, well, I will pursue my interests, and all of you should do that. So, and that was his message from UN General Assembly. So I'm sure that's a message he's going to carry forward because that's what he believes in. Now, how do we respond to that? Whether there is capacity in the system for middle powers to engage and build a concert of nations that can manage global governance? Because I think that will be critical in an age of disruption and in disruption of this scale and size. What happens to all of these issues, climate, technology, governance, even peace and security, where territorial expansion, if America is talking about territorial expansion as one of the primary drivers of its foreign policy, then that changes the whole conversation. And I think sovereignty is something that he's very keen on. And I think that's where he's saying that, look, sovereignty, I want to regain that sovereignty that he believes America has lost. And that entails both territorial sovereignty, economic sovereignty, and of other kinds. So I think that idea of traditional control over territory and how you respond to that I think is heavily ingrained in his mind. And that will have a bearing on how he deals with a number of other actors. So that is something that we need to be prepared for.
Thank you so much. In fact, I would add that I hope his quest for sovereignty doesn't lead to conquest. So then we really do go back to the 19th century. We have time for a last round of questions. I've been told by Professor Dabhade that 3 of his students have asked for the floor. That's Harish, Harsh, Tarun, and Neeraj. Please identify yourselves and we can take 2 more. So Harsh, where are you? इनको mic दे दीजिए.
Good evening to all the panelists. I am Harshvardhan and I'm an undergraduate student at OP Jinsal Global University studying international relations. Thank you all for this insightful talk. So my question would be on the possibility and future of BRICS in Trump's administration, especially because in the last few years we saw a huge development in BRICS forum. With the last summit, with this whole might be a rhetoric, but with a whole new currency, which Trump during his campaign session clearly said should not continue with this whole narrative. So, what is the future of BRICS? That's my question. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Tarun. I'm a PhD candidate at Seaport JNU. My question is to Professor Pant and Ambassador Sibal both. So in the new presidency, what is the future of transnational or proxy wars that we are seeing? Can we expect a similar Israel-Palestine ceasefire, peace deal in Ukraine as well?
Good evening, sir. My question is to Professor Pant. So how do you see the future of global nuclear security, keeping in mind the North Korea, Russia, and Iran nuclear nexus amid Ukraine war? And how do you see the future of Quad in terms of whether is it going to be strong or like Trump will withdraw, as like he's trying to say that we will withdraw from the NATO as well? And my second question is on transgender rights in US, as Trump has decided to identify only 2 genders, and in India, like we have seen, we have identified transgenders as 3rd gender, but in US, like we are decades ahead of them. So how do you see the future of transgender rights in terms of US population? Thank you.
Thank you. I would reword your question and say that he has now fallen behind almost 80% of the world on this issue. We have time for 2 more questions in case anyone wants to ask.
I'm Dinesh Sharma. Before Nixon went to China, there was a huge debate in the United States for and against opening to China. So the New York Times carried a cartoon, I still remember, that illustrated that 1 billion customers can't be wrong. Now the role has been reversed. Now China sees the rest of the world, including United States, as customers. Now this is the problem, and here India has a bigger problem. I think in this whole debate about Trump, India has a bigger problem with China because we have 2 issues. I will just sum it up. One is the territorial dispute. Another, China does not want to open its market to India, but it is using its Indian market to dump the Chinese product. So how will India navigate this kind of scenario?
There was the gentleman here. Please give him the mic. And that's the last question for this evening. The rest you can catch our 2 panelists and not let them go home until they answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador and Ambassador Sibal and Professor Pant. You know, I remember a cowboy film in which one of the powerful shooters says that the man who has the gold makes the rule. And this guy has the rule and he is at the...
In Hindi it's called Jo Jeeta Wo Sikandar.
वो सिकंदर, बहुत बढ़िया बताया मैडम आपने. तो कहने का मतलब ये है कि इस समय the way the international situation is unfolding, Trump has become abundantly powerful. And the other thing which perhaps none of the panelists talked about was that he may talk about China all the time, but behind the scene, he wants to have a rapprochement and to have a friendship with China. So if that happens, between the two of them, they will divide the world. It will be like the partition of Africa, which we hear in the old history books. So the point is, who will stop Trump from doing what he wants to do, A, and B, in such a situation, what India should do, whether India should leverage the power of the people who are into US, doing important jobs, or whether they should just look towards Trump as has been talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. That is it, except that I think you wanted one final comment, or please give her the mic. And then we have to wrap up. Yeah. Oh, the mic is here.
Thank you. What kind of
Please
role do you...
introduce yourself.
Sorry. I'm Ayushi, Dr. Manish Dabhade's colleague at JNU. So I would like both the speakers to just touch upon the kind of role that you see non-state actors, especially MNCs and high net worth individuals, playing in Trump 2.0, and the kind of impact that it would have on hyper-economic nationalism like MAGA and Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Thank you. We'll begin with Dr. Pant.
Thank you. There are a whole host of questions, and I'll leave the difficult ones for Ambassador Sibal. But I think on the future of BRICS, what is interesting is that if you look at the statement of BRICS themselves never talked of a currency, for example. What BRICS nations have been talking about are trading in each other's currencies, and I think that is a difference which often gets marginalized in discourse, because I don't think there is enough consensus within BRICS on an alternative to a dollar, for example, which is how it has been presented in certain quarters, because that's unlikely to happen, and for countries like India, that's going to be a challenge. There is no doubt about it, because if not America, then China will be the biggest player in the game, and economic arguments have a certain dynamic of their own. You cannot change the fact that China is the second most important, powerful economy in the world. So there is going to be that problem, and therefore I don't think that was always anyway part of the conversation. And trading in local currencies was the issue, and I think that continues to be a very major issue, where India continues to now, for example, with 20 odd countries, we have agreements to do that. I think the future of BRICS is for BRICS countries and BRICS Plus now to decide. But I do think that there is a lot of interest, and the idea that BRICS presents of an alternative financial system, and in particular if America is going to target countries the way it has targeted, for example, Russia, it is going to also further propel that move. On Ukraine, I think Ambassador Sibal would be better to talk about whether there is going to be peace or not, but I think in some ways, before he was president, before he took the seat, he was saying something else. Once he's on the seat, he's now making a lot of changes in his statements, the way he's approaching it, the way he's talking about Mr. Putin, that he's losing it, that that he has done a lot of damage to himself, all of those things. So there's a contrast in the way he's presenting the position, and I think certainly the constraints of his office are now chipping in. I don't see a dramatic and a very fast delivery on that. Once he was saying within 24 hours I'll bring it to an end, so on and so forth. So I don't think there is going to be anything dramatic, because ultimately, even if, for example, the active phase of war comes to an end, the bigger issue of what kind of a security architecture gets created in Europe, which can sustain individuals, because it's not simply a question of Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden, it is also a question of what Europe and Russia can live together with. in the Eurasian architecture. So what kind of an Eurasian architecture gets created where both sides' core interests get preserved? I think essentially that's the question, and I don't know whether anyone has any answer at this point on that, given how far they are. So even if Mr. Trump is able to put an end to the active phase of war, I think the conflict, fundamental drivers of that conflict will remain in the system. There are issues on Quad, on transgender. I think, Mr. Trump doing something on transgender rights or even on immigration, I look at them, his attempt at giving a message to his base that, look, you had sent me to deliver on certain ideas, I have delivered them. Now it is up to the courts to decide. So ultimately, all of these things have gone to the courts, and they will go to the courts. You're already seeing a counter movement, backlash. So in a sense, the institutional framework of American democracy will have to operate. What is certainly interesting is that now in the Supreme Court you have a conservative majority, which Mr. Trump has very effectively put in place. So whether that majority delivers on his commitments on some of these issues, for example, on birthright citizenship. Now, it's a fundamental mandate of American Constitution. How do you change that by an executive order is not entirely clear. And I don't think he can do that. So I think it has already gone to the court. And I think a lot of these issues on gender rights, for example, I see them meandering along for a while. I don't see a completion to this discourse. And as Ambassador Mukherjee said, you are already behind with the rest of the world. So I think the next administration and how they catch up. But I think in some ways this is also about a society coming to terms with itself, with its own sense of balance. Have you moved too much to the left, in terms of the whole woke ideology that you needed someone like Trump to bring you to the other side, and that jostling will produce an equilibrium? That remains to be seen. I think all societies go through that phase, including India's. We have seen that jostling in the political social space, and I think Americans are also going through that, and Europeans are also going through that process. China question is an excellent one. I think how does India navigate China is perhaps the existential question that India faces, and there America's role certainly will remain relevant. Whether with all the problems that America presents, I think a partnership with America is an important bulwark for us, which I don't think any of our policymakers would be willing to give up that easily. So therefore, you see continuous investment in this relationship. Sir, over to you.
A few things I'll add on this BRICS business. First of all, our foreign minister has said very clearly that de-dollarization is not on the agenda. But Putin himself has also clarified that there is no discussion on a BRICS currency. In fact, he ruled it out. He said that you can have a common currency. It's a very sensible proposition if the economies of the participating countries are at similar level. But if they are not, and in BRICS, the economies are so disparate that you cannot have a common currency. And he cited the EU example where you have the same problem because all the economies are not of the same strength, with Germany dominating, and therefore Euro has had a problem. So I think Trump is simply attacking windmills. Now, insofar as BRICS expansion is concerned, Saudi Arabia has started quietly stepping back. It sent its foreign minister to the last BRICS summit, and although Indonesia has gone ahead and become a permanent member, Saudi Arabia has not accepted. And I think he will come under, the Saudi Arabia will come under US pressure. And you can see already the Prince Mohammed bin Salman making very comforting noises to the United States. I'll invest $600 billion in the next 4 years in the United States. And Trump's he's a funny character. He says, well, he's told me $600 billion, I'm going to ask him to invest $1,000 billion, and he'll do it. That kind of a thing. So I think the momentum behind BRICS will continue, all the more because of Trump, because countries will want to hedge. And They know that we are entering an uncertain world, and therefore they have to have some groups which can give them a sense of comfort. And BRICS would be certainly a group of that kind. Secondly, this whole business of multipolarity. We are also supporters of multipolarity. And the BRICS agenda, in fact, I was associated with the creation of the Russia-India-China dialogue, which then expanded into BRIC and then later became BRICS. And the idea was rooted in multipolarity, because these discussions began during the unipolar phase of the United States. And today, power has dispersed more, economic and political power. And therefore, countries will be much more confident about creating, joining multilateral organizations, which gives them some kind of a cushion against what they may see is some sort of a resurgence of American hegemony. Insofar as Ukraine is concerned, I think Dr. Pant has very rightly said that ceasefire has to be somehow embedded in a larger agreement on European security. The reason why the Ukraine war has occurred is because there has been no consensus on a European security architecture. And the West and NATO have relied on two mechanisms for that, on which, despite everything else, nothing has changed. Expansion of NATO, expansion of EU. Economic expansion, security expansion. Treat Russia as a potential adversary and therefore try, if possible, to exclude it from being able to put any kind of pressure on Europe, and of course through the energy policies and sabotaging the Nord Stream through the core of economic interdependence, energy interdependence that has been destroyed. And the agenda remains that of Brzezinski, that if you knock out Ukraine out of Russia's orbit, then Russia ceases to be a European power. It becomes an Asian power. That is the thrust behind it. And Putin understands that. And he knows that if there's just a ceasefire, then it'll give time to Ukraine to regroup, for NATO to strengthen the Zelensky regime even more until the next round begins. And therefore, they will insist that two things must be agreed to. And I don't think Trump can deliver on that. No NATO membership for Ukraine, and that all the provinces or eastern Ukraine, which has been annexed by Russia, that annexation has to be accepted. I don't think Trump can deliver on this, because the Congress, a very strong sentiment in the Congress against this. So therefore I'm not very hopeful, but let's see what happens. Insofar as the global nuclear security, as you know, Trump has proposed a nuclear disarmament dialogue to Russia, but he wants to bring China in. It should be both Russia and China. China says we are not interested. Each of you have 6,000 nuclear weapons, I have only 500. So they would want to bring, at some stage, France and the UK in. So it's a very complicated thing. So I don't think that on this global nuclear security agenda, there's going to be much visible progress going ahead. Insofar as the two genders are concerned, associated with this is another major thing he has done, which is part of the same woke agenda, the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. He has trashed that. And insofar as this male and female is concerned, I think it's very much rooted in the terrible excesses in the United States about gender surgeries of children and this and that without parents' consent and stuff like that. So it's a rollback of that. In India, we also got influenced by the global globe agenda, we also have people like that, and therefore we have these option as Bhaswati has mentioned, there's male, female, and what is it, transgender, other, I don't know what the other. So, of course, it's a controversial thing, but I think, to my mind, somewhat a little conservative, I thought it was a ridiculous sight where Biden organized a huge mela in the White House for the LGBTQ, RSPT, whatever it is, people in the White House, and they were dancing away. It was so offensive. So I think there's a backlash in the United States, but it's for them to deal with this. And finally, China. Dumping Chinese products? No, I think there's no dumping. A lot of it is because these are the goods that we need for our own exports, pharmaceuticals and this and that. So a lot of it is actually what our industry needs for our own export capabilities. There are some areas where there is, toys and this and that and low technology products on which we should do something about it, because our deficit is as much as our defense budget, $80 billion and plus with China. And finally, Trump, G2, no. In the United States, there is a clear consensus on China in the US Congress and everywhere. And there are a lot of China hawks that he has surrounded himself with. He will try to make some deal with China, but I don't think that anybody is going to accept a G2, whether it's India, Russia, or powerful forces within the United States.
Thank you so much. We're going to put the entire discussion on YouTube, so please spread it around. I'd just like to add one point to the point made about transgender, to say that Trump's comments show that United States is not a country which has a long history, culture, and civilization like India. In our country, this has existed in our society for centuries. We've never made a hue and cry about it. We've never either elevated to woke status or to the right-wing status. This is part of our culture and history, and there is a big difference between those who come from long culture and civilization through millennia and others who think that they can suddenly rule the world by first killing off all the indigenous in that country and then calling themselves the world's only superpower. I don't know where my remarks put me, either in the woke category or in the other category, but I just feel, because I was ambassador to Netherlands, when the Dutch decided that all African countries, if they want development aid, have to agree to homosexuals adopting children. And I remember the Nigerian ambassador telling the Dutch Prime Minister that that is our business. We've had this in our part of the world for centuries. We don't need white people to tell us how to behave. I thought that was a very good answer. I'll now give the floor to Professor Dabhade to conclude.
Truly a brilliant note to end this fascinating conversation on. Thank you, Ambassador Mukherjee, for your graciously hosting and brilliantly shepherding this conversation, this panel discussion. Ambassador Sibal, it's always a delight, and you bring to the table so much wisdom, so much clarity. I think this is fascinating. I mean, really indebted to you for taking time out and coming and speaking with us today. Harsh always is a delight to hear. So thank you all. I really wish to thank all of you who have joined us today evening. I just want to end with, in fact, Ashley Tellis had written a piece way back in 2020, the surprising success of US-Indian partnership, and I'm pretty sure when Trump 2.0 ends, he's going to come back with exactly the same thing. Thank you so much.